das? Das ist mir, das ist mir.
Was ist los?
Das ist mir und ich sag dir, du bist ein feiner Mensch. Okay, let me send out the link. Okay, now we can go. And we can start. Taiwan, first Taiwan Hebrew. Copy. Paste. Okay. Yeah, you can all have a seat.
Ich möchte nicht diese Französisch sein, aber ich kann sagen, dass du hast schon eine zivilisierte Sprache. Und du kannst auch Hebräisch lernen.
Ja. Oh, Bezalel, what's it gonna be with you, Bezalel? Was wird sein mit dir? This is in Yiddish. I don't know Deutsch enough. Is there? Can you say that? Can you say was wird sein mit dir? Can you say that in German?
Was lost mit dir? Was ist lost?
Ja.
Lost.
Was ist lost?
Lost.
Los mir rüber. Los is
Schlecht.
los mir rüber. It means leave me alone. Los mir weg.
Das lost.
So what's los?
Lost.
Was ist los?
What's wrong with you?
Oh, what's wrong with you? Oh, I wasn't saying what's wrong with you. I just said what's it going to be with you. That's what I said. I didn't say. No, I didn't say anything wrong. Heavens forbid.
Okay.
Okay, let's.
What's the count? 2 or 3? You know there are some disputes.
Absolutely, we're going to touch upon it. Hey, Marty, you had your cheat sheet ready?
Sorry?
You had your cheat sheet? Your cheat sheet for the.
I did do my homework today.
You did.
Yeah.
And what did you find out? What did you discover?
Well, I discovered that Abraham was 99 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, when he fathered Yitzhak.
Right. Yep, that is correct. Okay.
I was impressed with that statistic.
In fact, he first turned a father when he was 86.
Okay, if I take the notes.
If you take one? Okay, here, I just sent the link to everybody. Hope Scott's there as well.
Shlomi,
Yes, my dear.
you know what I did to those Christians?
To the Christians?
Yes, they asked me what, Jews.
Oh, you mean for the seminar that you went to?
Yeah. I
Okay.
played the music of Gershwin.
You played the music of what?
Gershwin.
Gershwin.
Gershwin, you know he was a Jew?
Ah, I didn't know that. Boy, I see.
Gershwin.
Gershwin.
Really?
George
Yeah,
Gershwin.
I guess I would have guessed that.
It's kind of Yiddish name.
Gershwin, I know Gershwin.
George Gershwin.
Okay, maybe I didn't know, but anyway, let's close the door.
And it was an opera.
Okay.
I was talking about a very relevant thing. It was an opera, an American opera. It sings in English, and it's about like the biblical stories, etc. And one line says Methuselah lived 1,000 years.
Oh.
Okay. And then they say, but who calls that living when no girl will give him when she knows he's 1,000 years?
Oh my goodness me. Okay, but I believe that some.
I didn't write that. That's Gershwin.
Okay, but it's not.
George Gershwin.
It's not rabbi oriented. Yeah.
So you gave your talk 3 times.
Yeah.
More.
Okay, let's focus on what we're here for, which is to understand a little bit why the Arabs hate us. In fact, it is embedded in the weekly portion. You want to know the answer why the Arabs don't like us? I was going to send a message today about, did you see the message, the questions I asked about the class today? I always send it to you online. You don't do line, do you? I sent it to you though.
Yeah, but too late in the day, I didn't.
Okay, so what is this? Oh, okay. You have to watch yourself because it's all streamed and maybe somebody's listening. So first I wrote why the Arabs hate us, and then I changed it to dislike us, and then my wife said it's a little too rigid, so I said why the Arabs don't get along with us. So I hope that's Okay, on the third day of the creation, God Almighty collected the angels and said, we're going to create the land of milk and honey, and we're going to give it to the Jewish people. And then Satan, the devil, comes to God and said, why would you give the Jewish people the land of milk and honey? Why did they deserve milk and honey? You know, these guys are not always doing the right thing. So, it's a joke. So God said, yeah, the land is milk and honey, but wait, what about the neighbors? They're going to have the neighbors to take care of. So, yeah, milk and honey. I was just notified this afternoon.
Anything which is the least bad according to the Torah, not according to history. Least bad. The least is kind of fun usually.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe the least bad on the Bible.
Yeah,
And that's
correct.
already right.
Yeah.
But that's always also quite not a nice one.
Uh-huh.
Let's see.
Yeah, none of our neighbors are exactly accommodating, so to speak.
What about these people from whom Moses took his wife?
Midian.
Midian.
Oh, no, don't be fair.
You remember the story of Balak and Bilam, right? You remember? You wanted to, and the women of Midian and Pinchas. Yeah, we had.
Were they mean to the Jews?
They had their share of nastiness. Yes, they had, and more than that even. Yeah, they were actually good at what they were doing, which was bad. So they were good at doing bad. Anyway, this picture, I guess, is very common in the news. And if you want to get a little shocked, you'll see Nachmanides. Nachmanides lived about 800 years ago in Spain, and he had experienced firsthand, the Muslim and the Islam aggressiveness, and he saw how Muslim tribes went to take control, conquer the conquest of North Africa, and of course the spread of Islam. And he writes something quite astonishing, that in fact the reason why the Muslims don't like us so much is actually not our fault. It is because Sarah had sent out Ishmael. Ishmael is the patriarch of Muslims. She sent him out of the house, and look what Nachmanides writes on a verse that we read it actually last week in the weekly portion. Avram said to Sarai, Sarai said, we have to send her. So Avram said, your maid is in your hand, deal with her as you think right. Then Sarai treated her harshly, and she ran away from her. Hold on a second. Ramban says on these words, and Sarai oppressed her, and she fled from her presence. Literally face, our mother sinned in this oppression, and also Abraham in permitting her to do so. And Hashem heard her, which is Hagar's oppression, and gave her a son, who would be a wild ass of a man, to oppress the descendants of Abraham and Sarah in all kinds of oppression. Little did he know, 800 years ago, Muslim aggressiveness, which was, I guess, quite harsh in those days, but what level did it reach in our days? So Nachmanides says, if you want to find out why they hate us so much, it is in fact an error. He criticizes Sarah, but soon we'll see that criticism has a reason, and indeed she saw things that others had not seen, but it does not change the fact. The fact is that Ishmael, as the son of Abraham, was sent out from the house and was also cut out from the inheritance and was completely disconnected from the family, him and his mother. And because of that, we have a lot that they are feeling like we owe them for. You wanted to say something, I'm sorry.
Question. Where did Nachmanides live?
In Spain? I don't know exactly what city.
That means that he was supposed to conquer Spain by the Muslims.
Yeah, right. Spain and North Africa. Right, correct, absolutely. Yeah, Spain. It was, as I said, it was, and of course the Muslims who were conquering gave everybody a very good deal. Either become Muslim or we'll kill you, which is a very creative way to add leaders to your group, or add believers, to your group. Very, very creative way. And don't tell anyone, but they took it from the Christians, because they were also very good at giving everybody a choice in their famous or infamous crusades, weren't they? Yeah.
I think that's their version of a true Purubu.
Purubu.
Yes.
Why is it Purubu?
to force others to become like them.
Povo is multiply.
Yes, so they multiply, but not naturally. Very unnaturally, with the sword.
Okay, interesting insight. So when we read the weekly portion, we find several interesting questions about the behavior of Abraham and Sarai. Let's look at some of them. There's 4 questions we have. Why is Sarah treating Hagar this way? She is the one who had this idea. I'm going to show you soon the quote where Abraham and Sarah are 86 years of age and they're not having any children. Now they're doing everything right. We studied last week about Abraham and Sarah going through the 10 trials by God, and the trials were not to prove anything to them, but it was to make them stronger and to make everyone understand what they went through and for us to go through. Sarah, seeing there's no children, tells her maidservant, you come, and she has to actually persuade her to be together with her husband and have a child. So why is she sending her? The second question, how could Sarah ask Abraham to send away his only child? Remember, this was before Sarah had children after waiting for this child for 86 years. And the third question is, after Sarah's passing, why does Abraham go and marry the very same woman? Sorry, it says women, it's supposed to be woman. Sarah greatly disliked. We will see it also in the scripture. Abraham remarries the same Hagar, although her name was changed, and like I told you, Reuben, there's another version of this being another woman. And the fourth question is, after the passing of Sarah, Abraham goes and has 6 more children, and after he's having those children, he sends them away, and he gives everything he has to Isaac. What's the sense of that? So let's look a little bit about the scripture and see how exactly this evolved. Here's from Genesis 16. Sarah, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children. She had an Egyptian maidservant whose name was Hagar. Just as a side note, the Egyptian maidservant was none else but the daughter of King Pharaoh. Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, the one who took Sarah to his custody, seeing Sarah's beauty. Right? We read about it last week when Abraham approached Egypt and he was concerned that Sarah would be taken, and indeed this is what happened. Pharaoh, the almighty king of Egypt, takes Sarah into his custody, thinking of having a good time with her. And of course we know the story. There was an angel that accompanied her, and nothing could have happened. Unfortunately for him, he was struck by all kinds of different sicknesses because of Sarah. And seeing the divinity and seeing the holiness of Abraham and Sarah, after sending Sarah back to her husband, he said to his daughter, you better be a maidservant in the house of Abraham than being a queen in somebody else's house. So this girl, this lady who was a maidservant, who was a simple butler, a servant in Abraham's house, was no else than Pharaoh, the mighty Pharaoh's daughter. There was Hagar. So she says there's no children. She calls her maidservant. What?
Why a similar deal worked okay for Rachel and Leah and didn't work for Sarah?
Right. We will soon see what went wrong. Right. Apparently, we read about it last week. Bilhah. Right. There was 2 hay. Rachel did not have a hay. Bilhah gave her the hay. The hay was to make the yud into, right, to be able to bring children into the world, to multiply and so on. We'll soon see what went wrong and where actually it went wrong. Anyway, Sarah said to Abraham, look, God has kept me from bearing. Consult with my maid, perhaps I shall have a son through her. And Abram, which was before the name was changed, heeded Sarah's request. This is what Laban says to hint to us that even though Abraham wanted desperately to have sons, he would not act without the permission of his wife. It means it's not like Abraham thinking about himself. It wasn't his idea, it was Sarah's idea. She says, I have no children, maybe the servant will have children, and then we will raise those kids as ours. And of course, he did not do it without the permission of his wife. Even once acting, he would not plan on building a family with Hagar, rather Sarah. All of his intent was to do Sarah's will, so she should be pleased with her family and maidservants. And Rashi says, goes even further. Sarai, Abraham's wife, she took Hagar with words, you are fortunate that you have merited to cleave to a holy body such as this one. In other words, the servant was a bit reluctant to go thinking that she was a servant, a butler, and now she has to go and be with Abraham together in order to conceive. And actually Sarah, or Sarai, which was her name at that point, had to persuade her and said, you have merited, you are fortunate, so this is a good thing. Obviously this is something she's pushing through all the way. You wanted to say something?
Maybe my English is not very perfect, but I understand that butler is a male servant.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe it is.
Anybody knows better?
I don't know. Maybe it's perhaps.
Can it be female butler?
I don't know. Marty, you know. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll use a different word. I'm sorry. Okay.
No, I am.
No.
Yes, but
You might be right. You might be right. It's okay.
So, I mean, just check.
Okay. So here, and let's look at the continue of the story. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had born to Abraham, making merry. It's in Hebrew. It's called mitzachek. Mitzachek. I guess this is quite a literal translation as being happy or merry, like merry, happy. But it wasn't about being happy. And Sarah said to Abraham,
To Spanish say making mockeries.
Making mockeries. Maybe that's a little more accurate. And Sarah said to Abraham, drive out this handmaid and her son, for the son of this handmaid shall not inherit with my son, with Isaac. This is fast forward after Abraham was promised by God that he will have a child, and indeed he has a child. And now there's 2 children in the house. Lo and behold, from a house that had no children, now there's 2 children. One is Ishmael, the son of the maidservant, and the other is Yitzchak, Isaac, finally the son of Sarah. And they're growing up together. There was a gap in their ages. Ishmael was 13 when Isaac was born, so it's 13 years, but they were still in the same neighborhood, so to speak. What did she see? Look at what the Tractate Sotat says. Ishmael was building an altar and offered grasshoppers, that's what he had, I guess, on it for idolatry, Idolatry, right? This was a behavior, this making mockery was I guess the least of the concern.
I would say this is double mockery. Probably. I don't think it's very respectful for people doing real idolatry.
Oh, well, but for a child thinking of idolatry, maybe in their own world, yes.
Is Mitzachek related to Yitzchak?
Mitzachek is related to Yitzchak. It appeared to come from the same root, but it's not the root of happiness or joy. It is making things that are not so joyous. In other words, normally the word mitzachek is used in reference to idol worshipping, adultery, and killing. All these 3 very, very, very bad acts have the title mitzachek. You could call that a reference also mocking God. And it's just the whole behavior, what people say nowadays, that Ishmael had a smartphone, and Yitzchak, he was sitting with him on the smartphone, so they're wasting their time, they're doing something completely useless, and so on and so forth. So what Sarah saw on the spot was that the deviation had started already. We have 2 children that are apparently growing in the same house, but one of them had deviated to the wrong way. And Sarah, being a prophet and seeing, he's a little child, he's a 13-year-old, what can he do? He's doing some nonsense. But with her vision, she saw that he's actually going completely off the track. So she did not want this to have a negative influence of her son. So this is 13 years after the birth of Ishmael. This is when Isaac was born, and she's asking, not a little thing. She's asking a very serious thing. She's telling Abraham. She's saying, this can't happen. This can't continue. You have to drive out this woman together with her son.
Typical Jewish wife.
Typical Jewish wife. I don't know. And also with that respect, she also says, drive out this handmaid and her son, for the son of this handmaid shall not inherit with my son with Isaac. It's not only about the influence that Ishmael has currently on Yitzchak, it is also the inheritance. And that's really strange, because Ishmael was the firstborn. He was the first child born to Abraham. And we know the rule is that a firstborn gets double portion. And what Sarah was trying to do is to cut completely a child, not just a child, but the firstborn, cutting him from this whole story of inheritance. Abraham, not knowing what to do, turns to God, and God answers him with one of the most famous quotes that we all know: "Kol asher tomar elecha Sarah, shema bekola." Everything Sarah tells you, listen to her voice. Okay, whatever Sarah tells you, whatever your wife tells you, listen to her. That's what God tells Abraham. Very famous quote that's brought in many lessons that speak about peace in the home, right? And we'll soon see a little about that relationship between Abraham and Sarah, of how he really realized that his wife was seeing things that he didn't see. That was more than her intuition. That was a prophecy. It was also a prophet, but she was a much greater prophet. And let's look what happens. I'll go a little before that, before the story blew up, and let's see. Before Isaac was born, God is telling Abraham. God said to Abraham, "Your wife Sarai." We read about it last week when he spoke about the Hebrew names. "You shall not call her name Sarai, for Sarah is her name, and I will bless her, and I will give you a son from her, and I will bless her, and she will become a mother of nations. King of the nations will be from her." And look at continuous the conversation. Abraham said to God, "If only Ishmael will live before you." And that's really, really strange. God is telling Abraham, you have a son now, but that's not exactly what you planned. You have a son from the servant, but I'm going to give you a blessing that your wife of 99 years of age is going to get pregnant, and you'll have a son, and this son will take your tradition and everything you have onwards, and he will continue your work, and he will be the one, the chosen one, and so on and so forth. And what does Abraham says? Instead of getting overexcited, he says to God, "I already have a son, my son Ishmael." And he says, "If only Ishmael will live before you." In Hebrew we say Yichya lefanecha. Before you is a translation, but Yichya lefanecha, it means walk in the right path as well. Abraham also saw that his son is not exactly growing up to be who he thought he would be in his original plan. So he says to God, "We don't need more miracles of having another child. We have a child. Let's just make sure that child follows the path," which is also, again, very weird. Why does Abraham reject, so to speak, God's blessing? And he says, as long as I have a son and my son should be going the right path, that's sufficient for me. I'm satisfied with what you give me. Yeah?
I have a similar experience, tragic experience. My son left me. I understand as a father that he wanted God to straighten his son.
Aha.
So he loved him too. He said, "Straighten him," and that's okay. But maybe he wasn't bad.
Yeah, well, potentially he had everything that he needed to do the right thing, but unfortunately, although like Reuben was saying earlier, he did repent in the end of his life. Ishmael did repent and did go back to the right way. It was some sort of a gift God gave Abraham to see his son come back to where he was supposed to be, but unfortunately.
That's why the Muslims now worship that God in that.
Oh, we'll see why the monotheism and the way. So here's what happens next. Okay, so again, Ishmael is the son, and he's not really doing the right thing. God says to Abraham, "I'll give you another son." Abraham says, "You don't need another son. Just make sure this son goes on." And of course, the miracle happens. Sarah becomes pregnant. There's a new baby boy, Yitzchak. Joy, happiness, everything is good, and the house becomes everything that they wanted it to be, and Ishmael is left aside, and he takes his own inclination to the negative way, and that leads Sarah to determine that he will have to leave, and Abraham to comply with that. So the interesting part of, we're going to read it in next week's portion. After the passing of Sarah, the same woman that was casted out of the house actually remarries Abraham, and that's really weird because she was not really, his wife didn't like her, to say the least, or of course with the influence of the son. And then after the wife passes away, instead of cherishing her memory, he goes and marries someone that she didn't like in particular, and that's very, very weird and unlike Abraham. This is after Sarah's passing, Genesis 25, that's from next week. And Abraham took another wife, and her name was Keturah. Rashi says, what is that other wife? This is Hagar. It's the same woman. She was called Keturah because her deeds were as beautiful as incense, Ketoret in Hebrew, and because she tied, Keturah, the Aramaic for tied, her opening, for she was not intimate with any man from the day she separated from Abraham. So Hagar, although separated from Abraham in a tragic way, had kept herself clean and actually waited for this reunification together with Abraham. And then look what happens after he marries this woman Keturah, which according to the version in Rashi is the exact same woman that he casted away earlier. And she bore to him Zimran and Yokshan and Medan and Midian and Ishban and Ishbak and Shuach. These are the children, and Abraham gave all that he possessed to Isaac and to the sons of Abraham. What's that word? What's the word here? Concubines. Abraham gave gifts, and he sent them away from his son Isaac while he, Abraham, was still alive, eastward to the land of the east, which is also very puzzling to many commentators of the scripture. What is exactly east? Where exactly were they sent? Where are the sons of the other sons of Abraham? But again, the story gets another twist. He remarries the woman that he had to send away, and he has 6 children. Correct. And in fact, Keturah, according to the version that she was a different woman, not the same one, she descends from Yefet. And you'll soon see 3 sons of Noah: Shem, which Sarah came from, Ham, which Hagar came from, and Yefet, which Keturah came from, and that's also Midian, and the Christians, and Edom. That comes from that line of genealogy. So yeah, you're right. Midian is the one that helps us to identify where exactly this legacy or this dynasty takes us to. So what is the story? He remarries the woman. He has another 6 children. Remember, it was someone that was 99 years of age, and God tells him, you're going to have a son after having one at 86, which was also a miracle, 99. And now what happens? Sarah passes away. Guess what? He goes and has 6 other children. And those 6 children, he has them, he raises them, and then he sends them away. He sends them eastward to the land of the east. He wants nothing to do with them. He gives them gifts. But everything he had, all of his possessions, all of his legacy, he transfers to his son Isaac. What is the rush of having other children and then sending them away? Before we move on, let's look a little bit about the relationship between Abraham and Sarah. Of course, it appears to be disrespectful to her after she passes away that he goes and marries the woman that she disliked so much, and he goes and have other children. But in fact, it's not only the love they had between them, but the amount of respect they had between them is something that's hard to imagine. We know that every Friday night we say a song. You never come here on Friday nights, but you should start saying, we sing a song called Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. It is a quote from Proverbs, from Mishlei. It is written by King Solomon. Did you notice that? You were here on Friday nights, Daniel. You don't come down. You should come. You came on July and Friday night. Wow, that's you should get a medal and a smiley sticker also. I'll get you a smiley sticker.
I have a question.
Yes, you can have 2 questions even.
In the Jewish tradition, remarrying after the wife died, after a certain time of mourning,
yes.
Is it wrong?
No, it's not wrong, but we're saying that if it's the very same woman that Sarah sent out, again, according... Yeah, so... But you said... No, that's not wrong. No, it's not.
He was not respectful of her...
Because of that woman.
The same woman.
Just because of that woman. Again, according to the version that it is the same woman, because there's a version that it's not the same woman. So there's nothing wrong with that per se, but, with the context of how it happened. So, in fact, Eshet Chayil was composed by, we know it from King Solomon, but in fact it was a eulogy said by Abraham to his wife. This was said at her burial place, and if you look closely, I took some of the verses, I put them in English. You see that it all speaks about in past tense. A woman of valor who can find, for her prices beyond pearls. Her husband relied on her, and he will lack no gain. She requited him with good and not with evil. All the days of her life she looked for wool and linen and worked with it, with the will of her hands, and so on and so forth. All the words are written in the past tense, at least in Hebrew. Most modern translation translated to present tense, but in Hebrew it's written in the past. It's all in the past, and this was indeed something that she deserved, at least by her husband Abraham. He, according to some of the scriptures, I didn't translate it to English though, the last verse I quoted is, she looked for wool and linen and worked it with the will of her hand. So Tanhuma says, what is wool and linen? It says that is the time when she sent out Ishmael and separated him from Yitzchak. And it appears to be completely out of context. Wool and linen, Ishmael and Yitzchak, what does one have to do with the other? So it says that there's a prohibition to wear wool and linen together, right? So we have to separate. If you have a garment made out of wool, you can't have linen, and if you have linen, you can't have wool together. It's called shatnez. It's one of the few prohibitions that have absolutely no reason whatsoever. There's several prohibitions that are in the Torah that would have no reasoning whatsoever, and that's those mitzvot, those commandments teach us that, in fact, we cannot only rely on our common sense. We have to have faith in Hashem, and sometimes even if it makes no sense, we would still fulfill and would still go ahead with that. So one of the mitzvot is called shatnez. I don't know if you know, but in many Jewish communities around the world, there are labs, and you go, and if you buy a new garment, if you buy a jacket, a pants, suit, whatever, you send it to the lab, and they'll come back with a result. They take samples of the fabric and then tell you if it's a problem, if it has wool and linen. My friend bought a suit in China, it's a real story, a suit that said 100% wool, and he took it to the lab in Israel because he wanted to make sure that it has no linen in it. So he gave it to the lab, and he came back and he said, there has no wool in it, right? So then you shouldn't be worried. It's 0% wool. It says wool 0. It didn't have linen in it as well. It had a lot of polyester and all the other plastic replacement, but the label said 100% wool, and in fact they had no wool. So and the lab wasn't wrong. That's in case you buy new jackets, new suits in China. So no need to worry, no need to be concerned. Just a second, I'll take your question. So wool and linen are to be separate, and she looked for wool and linen, meaning she made sure wool and linen, just like in the garment, you're not supposed to have them together, that's a prohibition. She also made sure Isaac and Ishmael will be separated because one had negative influence on the other. That's one of the interpretations on that verse. You wanted to say something, yes?
Yes. First comment about clothes made in China. At home I have a label cut off from a t-shirt. It says 100% nylon and 100% cotton.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Okay, so that's as far as...
It's like the elections in Israel, in the Arab settlement. They have the elections there. One person got 70% of the votes, the other person got 85% of the votes, and another person got 56% of the votes. So it doesn't really... Anyway, that's... it happens, still happens today.
About wool and linen, this reminds me very much of Esau, the hairy one, and Yaakov, the smooth one.
Yes.
That sounds very similar distinction.
Why? Well, linen is small. I don't know. I mean, wool you could relate to it, but...
Linen is smooth, and wool is rather like
I know.
Like a beard. So, I think it's kind of historical parallel.
Interesting.
And those two brothers.
I must say it's interesting. Anyway, so obviously we understand that there was the relationship between Abraham and Sarah was not fragmented. It was not dysfunctional. It was very good. And still, when Sarah said, we have to send out Ishmael, the boy, we have to send out his mother, Abraham complied. And we saw that Sarah visioned or perceived things that nobody else saw. But what was exactly behind it? We'll try to analyze a little better what exactly triggered her to go through that extreme and say, after bringing her maidservant home, after having her have a child, being intimate with her own husband, having a child. Everything is by the plan, and then something goes wrong, and then no plan, no gain, right? Speaking of China, you know how when you go in China they have T-shirts with English words that make no sense whatsoever, right? So I once saw in Guangzhou somebody wearing a T-shirt that said "No more game." No more game. I mean, what's no more game? But anyway, anyway, for Sarah, no more game. Okay, maybe that T-shirt could have been appropriate for that one. Let's look at the story that's brought in the Talmud about Rabbi Benah. Rabbi Benah was an individual who dedicated his life to find different graveyards and different tombstones to make sure the Kohanim, the priest, a priest, a Kohen, is not supposed to be in the area of a dead person, because a dead person has impurity, right? Death is the source of all impurity. So a priest, a Kohen, is not supposed to be in the area when a dead person. So that's why priests are prohibited from visiting cemeteries. And in fact, when they go to cemetery, there's such a thing called Chikat Kohanim, which is the lot where the priests are buried. It is only at the opening of the ceremony, so they're not surrounded by tombs. They're not surrounded by graves, because that would render them, even today, which everyone is impure, and we don't have a holy temple. Everyone requires purity before approaching the holy temple. Nobody has that. We still take precautions. I'm not a Kohen, but I know other people.
Abstract to some extent, because it's not always say that our Kohanim don't have to manage in them. We say they have it.
Right.
Nevertheless, they have to avoid that impurity
as possible.
They already have it.
Correct. They have to avoid as possible. They need not to add more impurity on their already impurity. So here's what Rabbi Benah, a very interesting story from the Talmud in Baba Batra. Rabbi Benah was marking burial caves for the purpose of helping to prevent the contracting of ritual impurity. When he arrived at the cave of Abraham, which is the cave of Machpelah, if you've been, Daniel, you've been to Israel, right? You said you went. No, you didn't. You should go. You go to Hebron, it's where the cave of Machpelah. He encountered Eliezer, lo and behold, the servant of Abraham, who was standing before the entrance. This, of course, is many years after the passing of Abraham and Eliezer. And of course, Rabbi Benah had visioned or saw, or in some sort of a setting, he was seeing Eliezer. And he said to him, Rabbi Benah said to him, what is Abraham doing at this moment? Eliezer said to him, listen carefully, he is lying in the arms of Sarah, and she is examining his head. What is examining the head? You have kids, you know how you have kids, you have to take care of their head. Lice, 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 kinin. You know lice, right? You examine the head, you have kids, you have to examine. Your mother check your lice when you were young? No? You never had long hair? I'm very happy, it's good. So she was examining his head. Rabbi Benah said to him, go tell him that Benah is standing at the entrance, so that he could assume an appropriate position to receive a visitor. You want to get into Abraham, that will be a little inappropriate if he's there lying like this and his wife is checking his head. That's not such a position to receive guests. Eliezer said to him, let him, meaning Rabbi Benah, enter, meaning you can enter, says it is known that there is no evil inclination in this higher world. So it is not inappropriate for Rabbi Benah to see Abraham and Sarah in this position. He entered, examined the cave in order to measure it, and exited. Funny that he did not have interaction with Abraham. He's already there, and he's kind of minding his own business, right? She was examining his head, taking out the lice, and we'll soon see the meaning of that in spiritual world.
Excuse me. Does it mean that it was like the netherworld?
That is a higher world, and I know what you want to say. I'm not sure what level of spirituality.
Abraham was dead already.
Absolutely, yes.
So it was.
Eliezer was not alive.
Yes, neither was Sarah. Only Rabbi was alive in that story. But he entered the cave. So he entered the cave. This is kind of it's a synergy between spiritual and physical. It's some sort of what status of prophecy? It was some sort of a prophecy. He entered the cave. All he needed was to mark the cave to see where it starts, where it ends, so nobody would step in it or next to it. And as he enters the cave, he has a whole interaction with Eliezer, and he sees Abraham and Sarah. And it's an interesting story, but it also teaches us a lot, and specifically that part where Abraham lies down and Sarah examines his head. Abraham and Sarah were both commanded by God, and their command by God was to go and spread monotheism, to teach the world of the existence of God. And they are not just normal people. They're not just regular human beings. They were human beings, of course, but they are the patriarch and the matriarch, the father and the mother of all humanity. They are the only people who are actually going to change the world. They are giving a message of hope, a message of faith, and their mission is double. On one hand, they have to influence the world in a universal level. They need to make people understand that there is such a thing as God. And on the other hand, they have to make sure the Jewish religion or the Jewish race or the Jewish nation is unique and special. So on one hand, we have a global impact. On the other hand, we have something unique. And this is where the distinction is between Abraham and Sarah. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I can define it as Abraham was the first guy who had God's phone number.
God's phone number. Okay.
Directly.
Yeah. So
Others couldn't.
Others couldn't. And Abraham was said by God, why? He said, Lo yikareh shimcha Avraham. I'm not calling you Avraham anymore, but Abraham, ki av hamon goyim, for a father of many nations I have made you. And Abraham was destined by God to be a father to all nations. A father who conceives, who takes care of all nations, all different faiths, all different races, all different people. Whereas Sarah had one child. Her child was Isaac. Her role was to take care of Isaac and to take care of the tradition of the Jewish people.
But she also received the hay in her name.
She did. She received the hay in her name. She was a partner to Abraham. But while Abraham was focused more on the global mission, because that was his role, Sarah was focused more on the unique part that had to do, that dealt with the Jewish people. And this is what Yalkut Shimoni says. Father to all believers, Abraham married 3 women. Sarah, a descendant of Shem, Hagar, a descendant of Ham, and Ketuah, a descendant of Yefet. That's a version where the 3 women were different. The first and the third was not the same. The second and the third, were not the same. So this Midrash says that in fact Abraham was in charge of all humanity, all mankind. And the question we have, was he successful? Was he successful or not in his task? So we have to say, let's look at what Maimonides says about the way religion evolved, right? We were talking about it briefly on Shabbat, last Shabbat, the involvement of Christianity, how it started and how it became what it became. Scott, who was here, had a lot to contribute to that because he has a lot of background and history. But we have some sort of written history about Islam, how that started, how that evolved. But let's look at what Maimonides says. Okay, first let's look at Abraham. So Sarah is the Shem, that's where the Jews came from. Hagar comes from Ham, that's where the Muslims came from. And Ketuah from Yefet, that's where the Christians come from, like Reuben was saying correctly, identifying Midian and Edom, which is of course the same lineage that the Christians started from. Of course, the first Christians were all Jews, so that's kind of reflecting to that. But the masses that were later influenced by the Christians were not of Jewish descent. Yes?
How did the Chinese fit into this?
Oh, I was waiting for that question. What about the Chinese? I was waiting for that question. I'm Chinese, you know. I know, you're a Taiwanese citizen. What about the Chinese? Okay, we'll get to that soon. And here is what Maimonides says, a very, very interesting part. This is towards the end of the book. The laws of king and all the doing of Jesus, the Nazarite, and of that Ishmaelite, and look in italic font, Muhammad, the Rambam labels him as Meshuggah. It is a Teman. The Rambam
intended for a limited audience.
Yes, and the reference for Muhammad, as Meshuggah is limited to that context. But of course, who came after him, right? First Jesus and then Muhammad who came after him, are nothing but to pave the way for the King Mashiach, for the coming of the Messiah, and prepare the entire world to worship God together. How is it so? The world is now already filled with matters of Mashiach and matters of Torah and matters of commandments. Knowledge of these matters have spread to the distant islands and to the many nations of those with uncircumcised heart. They discussed these matters and the commandments of the Torah. Some of them, as did Muhammad, say that these commandments were once true but have since been cancelled for our times, as they were not meant to be observed for all generations. Some of them say these are secret matters and are not simple as they would appear. And now the Mashiach, right, they say the Mashiach Jesus has come and revealed these secrets, etc., etc., etc. Maimonides says, okay, Christians are giving us a hard time, Muslims are giving us a hard time, but you should all know they are actually acting a service. They are completing the task of Abraham. They are preparing the world for the coming of Mashiach. They are preparing the world for a better future. Once they annihilated paganism, granted in very creative ways, and we don't vouch them for the ways that they had taken to get rid of paganism, but what they did, and exactly what we were talking about earlier, going to further islands that were completely out of the reach, and teaching the people of having one God, and with a little asterisk with regards to Christianity, but that's a different discussion of exactly the unity of God. You were saying
that there is some spiritual value to the teachings of those misleading teachers.
Yes, yes. And in fact, he's taking the good of it. Obviously, we were all discussing many, and including again at Teman, of course, the negative implications of such faith, of such belief. But Maimonides said, if you look at the scope of a universal level, and you look what's going on, where people don't necessarily take paganism now for granted, and they would think that this is something that is not real, rather they would adopt a different monotheistic religion, is a way that the world is becoming ready to acceptance of God completely. Yes?
I want to take issue with the notion of limited audience.
Limited
There
audience.
are 7 billion people in the world.
Yes.
1 billion are Muslims. The rest do think that he's Muslim.
We are talking specifically in context of the letter here in Teman.
Yeah.
Originally just a response to very specific questions for some people in
I'm just
Yemen.
updating it.
Yeah. I got to tell you that in those days, it was very difficult to make an opinion in public. I think in our days it's the same. It's the
The
same.
Muslims can't hear wrong.
Yeah. Well, they could, and they are. So here,
That's what you're right.
okay, so here coming back to our story, Maimonides describes how things are in the scope of the world as in general. So coming back to our story, Abraham is married to 3 women and he has 2 children. Abraham has to take care of everybody and anybody, whereas Sarah is married to 1 husband and has 1 child. All of her role is to take care of Yitzchak, Isaac, the one to continue Abraham in everything. And this is where things become complicated, where you have a conflict of interest. On one hand, Abraham says, bring everybody, let's make everybody closer, let's understand, let's teach everyone, let's be tolerant, let's help everybody. And Sarah is, with all the good intentions you have, we have a child we have to take care for. We have a child we need to educate. We have someone we have to give him everything we have in order to continue this tradition. And my role as a mother is to take care of that son. So Sarah, understanding that Ishmael is going the wrong way. And again, we're asking, what was the trigger? So he was doing some stupid things. All the children do stupid things. Everybody does. But Sarah, as someone who is in charge of her own son, of Yitzchak, as a mission that was casted upon her from God, understands that it's now or never. It has to happen. The disconnection has to happen. Yishmael has to be separated, so much separated that it has to be taken completely out of the picture if you want to make sure that Yitzchak will be the one to prevail. And in fact, Sarah was not wrong. Okay, not just by understanding what goes on today. Let's look at what the Zohar says, a very interesting prophecy that has to do with some history, some common day history. Zohar Vayela says, this is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, for 400 years stood the angel of Ishmael and asked before God, Ishmael was circumcised, so why doesn't he have a share in you, like Yitzchak? What did God do? Distant them from cleaving to him, but gave them a piece of the Holy Land, and the children of Ishmael are to control the Holy Land when it was vacant, and they will delay the return of the Jewish people until the merit will end. Ottoman Empire, this was a battle, when they won the Ottoman Mamluk battle. This was 1517, according to modern history, January of 1517. In 1917 is, of course, the Balfour Declaration, and this is the official end of the Ottoman Empire. Exactly 400 years. The Zohar said, for 400 years, the Ishmaelite, the descendants of Ishmael, had this, the angel of Ishmael comes to God and says, we also are circumcised, we also have a right. And indeed, for that, for 400 years, look at that, it's written in Zohar, 400 years is when the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Muslim Empire, had been in control of the land of Israel. And then when 1917, the Balfour Declaration, the beginning of the British Mandate, it is when they had lost their control of that land. So for 400 years is exactly the time, right? That's what the Zohar says. You were saying something?
Yes, I want to understand this. We are basically the Jewish tribe, and we do accept converts, but that's a very minor portion. The Muslims, on the other hand, they are trying to convert anybody inside, including you and me.
Right.
Okay, of course they not succeeded with us at least.
At least.
So the Turks, they are not direct descendants of Ismail.
Right, but they
They're
were...
not Arabs, they're Turks. They come from the Central Asia.
Right, but they were, at that time, they were spreading Islam. That was their theology. Am I wrong? Ottoman Empire was...
Can they be called the children of Ismail?
Well,
Yes. Just as the other Turks who were Khazars converted to Judaism are counted as Yitzhak. Those Turks also existed.
correct.
Spiritually they are.
Yes, it means that you could actually change your descent with theology, so to speak, right? We say Zerah Israel, the seed of Israel, which is someone who converted. They might be born in China or in Japan, but they are Jewish just like me and you. And the reason why we don't have... Or Taiwanese like you. The reason why we don't have many converts is because we take these things very seriously. We take this matter seriously, and we are not interested in having people just do what we do because we do it, right? We are not there. Our mission as Jews is not to make other people Jewish. It is to make other people act in the way God wants them to. So, in fact, what we are attacked about not accepting converts is no reason to attack. It's a reason to praise, because we don't say that people have to be like us in order to be redeemed or have salvation or have whatever other promises made by other religions in other institutions by other leaders. And I won't elaborate further than that. But we're not saying to everybody, or even the people we are here in Taiwan, everybody do what I do, raise your right hand, I raise my hand, you raise your hand, we don't do that, right? Say, be a good person, adhere to the 7 Noahide laws, which is no killing, no stealing, no adultery, no believing in God, and so on. Very simple laws, and you will be just a wonderful, wonderful guy. You don't have to be like me. There's no instruction in the Torah where people have to be like me. So obviously, what is the source of criticism on Judaism is in fact the source of pride, because we are not interested in...
But we do accept converts, just we don't encourage them.
We accept them, but they have to go through a lot in order to convert.
They have to be discouraged rather than...
Yeah, we discourage them.
It's not like, I heard that the Druze or something, like you must be born the Druze.
Could be, yeah. I mean, yeah, in fact, the Talmud says that the reason why the exile had lasted for so long is in order for other converts, people who descend originally spiritually from Israel, would come back to where they belong spiritually, again, not necessarily their facial and genealogy. It's, of course, the spiritual root of things. You were saying something?
I was thinking about why people convert.
Okay. Well, different reasons, I guess. And this is exactly what happens with Rabbi Banah, his vision. He was walking into the cave, and Abraham was lying there, and Sarah was taking the lice from his head. What are lice? Lice are fed by blood, right? They are taking from the blood, and they don't have existence other than what they do, and they take. And Sarah understands that what happens is that everybody is piggybacking on Abraham because of Abraham's approach of being the first monotheistic, the founder of monotheism, and from him it all descended, the Christians, the Muslims, the Jews, and she's there to pick up those lies and say, no, you're not getting there, only Yitzchak is getting what it is. And she's taking those lies back, she's taking him out, and that's what God tells him. That's what God tells Abraham. Everything that Sarah tells you, you have to listen. In other words, God consent to that. Yes, your mission is to be of influence to everyone, but you shall not forget that who is going to continue your tradition, who is going to be there for you. It's Yitzchak, and then Yaakov, and then his children, and so on and so forth. You were saying?
About the word monotheistic.
Yes.
As far as I know from history, there was one Egyptian pharaoh who considered the idea that there was only one God, but that was son. That was his son. So, our God is not a certain celestial body, it's the God, the abstract one. So, in this sense, monotheism in its primitive form may be just worshipping one object as Mama existed before Abraham. Or how do you take that story about that?
I say that there was worshiping the sun, they're worshiping the moon, they're worshiping a star or several stars.
They're polytheistic.
Yes.
But one pharaoh abolished that all, fired all the priests, fired all the idol worshippers, and said we only worship the sun. That's the only God there, which is the sun. So, and then after he died, they went back to the old backwards.
So, I mean,
but that kind of,
I hear what you're saying. Okay, I mean,
I would say it will be Avodah Zarah still, even if it's the same.
Oh, it will be Avodah Zarah par excellence. It will be Avodah Zarah. Yeah, obviously, they're worshiping the moon and the sun, and
it's a ball of plasma.
I think the answer to that is I think that even those who had acknowledged the sun as a god were willing to coexist with those who saw the moon as a god, and they just say, okay, for you this is the god, for me this is the god. In other words, the truth was not piercing, was not penetrating everything. It wasn't like when you were telling me about that encounter you had with the Muslim who was upset with you for not what did he say, for not acknowledging Muhammad.
Right.
And he says, well, other people are right, but you guys, well, you know why? Because
we acknowledge Jesus, we acknowledge Moses. But you don't acknowledge our prophet, there was no possible dialogue anymore.
You see? Why don't you acknowledge their prophet? Because you have one and you're saying, I understand this is the truth.
Look at his Muslim. Look at what he just looks like a terrorist.
Here, look like a terrorist. Here, look. I hope he's not watching. There, take.
The Chinese say that if you talk about catching mice, the mice can hear you and hide away. So don't worry about ghosts.
Oh, okay. I'm not worried about.
Can you say that phrase?
I'm not worried about ghosts. I'm worried about people. So, in other words, what Sarah was telling Abraham, listen here. You want to influence everyone, you want to help everybody, that's great. But you have to understand something. In order to influence people, you have to be special. You need to be unique. You cannot be just like everybody else. A king who wants to be buddies with everyone. He's a great king, right? But he has to, on a certain level, say, stop. This is my palace. This is we're friends and everything, but I'm still the king, and you are my people. Right? You have to be in a different status in order to influence. It's not a contradiction to influencing, it's a catalyst. In order to influence, you have to be unique, you have to be special, and that is what Sarah was saying. The story that happened with Bill Gates in 2013, there was one of the biggest deals that happened in the Israeli ecosystem when the big company of Warren Buffett, what is it called, Berkshire? They purchased this big Israeli conglomerate who makes a lot of things, and there was a group of journalists that was involved with that, and they were interviewing Bill Gates, and Bill Gates told them, I showed you once that video of a guy named Kiwi Bernhard, where there's a Jewish guy. He lives in South Africa, and he was invited by Microsoft to give a speech at their annual conference of leaders of VPs and all the big guys. And this guy called him back and said he's not coming because their conference happens on Shabbat, and he can't be there speaking publicly on Shabbat because that violates Shabbat, of course.
For no money. For no money.
No, they offered him a big chunk of money.
Yeah, and for no money.
Yes, right. And then they wanted double, triple. They said, "Oh, we'll pay you." And he said, "I'm not coming. This is it." And then they had to move the conference to a different day in order to have him as a speaker. So Bill Gates was let know of that incident. So he said, "I can buy many things. I can't buy one Shabbat of a Jewish person." In other words, he appreciated like never before. And we know that it's a rule. I believe this quote was said by Jonathan Sachs, the previous chief rabbi of the UK, and he said that in his 60 or 70 years of experience, he encountered the following saying: non-Jews respect Jews that respect Judaism. So if we stand for our own rights and we stand for our own religion and our own tradition, other people would respect that and would comply and would say, "You know what? I think this is a beautiful thing that you care about something that is really important for you, that's a part of who you are, and that's your religion." And let's look at what the Rebbe says about this from the Likutei Zichron. Abraham was not only the father of Isaac, but also Ishmael's father. Moreover, Ishmael was his first son. He made Abraham into a father of many nations. Sarah, however, was the mother of Isaac only, which means she belonged to the Jewish people solely. Since Isaac was born, she made sure the drawing of godliness will only be to the appropriate place, the side of holiness. This also explains her relationship with Ishmael, sent out that maidservant and her son, which comes from her intolerance of negativity. Abraham was busy publicizing godliness to all human beings, even to those who bow down to the dust of their feet, while Sarah's role was to differentiate between the abundance of Isaac to the one of Ishmael. So, in other words, this gives us a little more understanding of what made Sarah send away Ishmael. This was her role, and this is how Abraham complied with her, because he also understood that this is the only way that Judaism will survive. And in fact, this is exactly where it all started, because many of the people that criticize that story and other stories do not understand that being different doesn't mean there's no wording in Torah about superior versus inferior, about having us higher and other people lower. It all speaks about being different, and the fact that we are different is, it's inevitable. That's the way we were made. That's the way Hashem made us to. But instead of being upset about it and perhaps even shy about it or even embarrassed, we should be proud of it, and we should say, yes, Abraham is a father to all nations, but Sarah made sure Yitzchak, Isaac, is the one that takes it forward. And as descendants of Yitzchak, as descendants of Yaakov, Jacob, which his name was Israel, and we are the children of Israel, we should take that same route, take the same channel, and say, indeed, we are different, but we are here to help and to influence others. You wanted to say something, Betzalel? Yes?
There's something poetic in that it shows the woman as the tradition keeper. Woman as the responsible for their household and for what we stand for. Well, the man goes out and spreads his seed. And maybe that's why in our tradition we count the Jew from the mother. If it was from the father, we would be here.
Absolutely, yes. That is one of the reasons. Of course, the mother is, if you say the father is the minister of foreign affairs and the mother is the minister of interior, she makes sure the house, in Hebrew we say akeret habayit. You know the word akeret habayit? Akeret habayit means ikar habayit. It means the home relies on her. The tranquility, the peace, and even the actual structure of the home that relies on the woman. And here we see, like you said, a beautiful example to that. So that gives us a little bit of understanding. It doesn't give us a solution of how the Arabs will stop hating us, but it does give us the reasoning. And hopefully, if they understand that this is nothing personal, it's just the way we do things, and that's the way we have to be proud of who we are, maybe they would have an easier time to consolidate with it. But until that happens, we'll have to wait till Mashiach comes and protect ourselves from from all kinds of dangers. Marty, you had a question to ask? No questions. Daniel?
No, I was just thinking about that. In my college, there's a guy, he's half Palestinian, half Hungarian, and he's practicing Islam. And he's now working at the Saudi Arabian embassy.
Saudi Arabian embassy here in Taipei?
No, in Budapest.
In Budapest.
And it's actually 50 meters away from a research institute of the Foreign Ministry, where I work as an intern. And many of our researchers who are concerned with the Middle East are actually Jews, all of them. And they are visiting the embassy on a weekly basis because all the diplomats like them, so they are giving us actually dates. So the whole research institute is flooded with fresh dates from Saudi Arabia, and everybody is eating dates. So actually in Budapest, I believe this peaceful relationship between Jews and Muslims.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's great. That's encouraging. I didn't think Budapest would be
unfortunately, I have a different experience here.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Did you see what I did to that booklet?
What did you do?